When you hear the name Pericles, your mind probably jumps straight to the Golden Age of Athens, right? Art, philosophy, democracy. I mean, he was kind of the man behind the brand. But his story isn't just about marble temples. It was a massive, high-stakes political gamble that would either cement Athens as the glory of Greece or, well, lead it straight to ruin. So let's unpack that gamble.
You know, the historian Thucydides, who actually lived through all of this, he just nailed the paradox of Pericles perfectly. How can a city be a true democracy, but at the same time really be governed by its first citizen? It's this tension that's at the very heart of his career. Was he a guide for the people, or was he a ruler?
His legacy is just a complete study in contrasts. I mean, on one hand, you've got this visionary guy who built monuments that, let's be honest, still take our breath away. And he championed a political system that gave real power to the average person. But on the other hand, you have the leader whose policies pushed Athens into a devastating, nearly 3-decade-long war.
So which one was he? To really get a handle on the man and his incredible gamble, we have to look at both sides of the coin, the shining achievements and, yeah, the dark, dark consequences of his leadership.
Okay, first up, let's see how he built the so-called Golden Age from the inside out. And it all started with his most famous domestic policy, giving power to the people.
So, before Pericles came along, politics was pretty much a game for the rich. He completely turned that on its head. He had this core belief that the real strength of Athens came from all its citizens, the demos, not just the wealthy elite, and his reforms were designed to make that an absolute reality.
He didn't just tweak the system, he fundamentally rewired it. Power was basically stripped from the old boys' club, the aristocratic council, and handed over to the General Assembly where everyone had a voice. But here's the real game changer. He introduced state pay for public service, like being on a jury. All of a sudden, a poor farmer or a craftsman could actually afford to take a day off work to participate in his government. I mean, that was nothing short of revolutionary.
But, you know, radical democracy wasn't his only project. Pericles wanted Athens to look like the center of the world. And to make that happen, he proposed a building program on an absolutely epic scale, funded with a staggering 9,000 talents of silver.
And this is what all that money bought. The iconic Parthenon, that grand gateway to the Acropolis, a colossal golden statue of Athena. These weren't just buildings, you see. They were massive statements of Athenian power, of their glory, their cultural dominance, and, not for nothing, they gave work to thousands of citizens.
Which brings us to the big, kind of uncomfortable question, doesn't it? 9,000 talents was an absolute fortune. Where in the world did Pericles get it? And the answer to that takes us to the much darker side of the Golden Age.
Yep, this is where the gamble gets really risky. Because the glory of Athens, well, it was built on a foundation that was starting to look less like a friendly partnership and a whole lot more like an empire.
Okay, so it all started with this thing called the Delian League. After the Persian Wars, a bunch of Greek city-states formed this league for mutual defense. It was simple. Everyone pitched in ships or money to a common treasury on the island of Delos. It was supposed to be a league of equals. At least, that was the theory.
But Pericles, he's systematically changed the game. First, in 454 BC, he moves the entire league's treasury from that neutral island right into the heart of Athens, claiming it was for security reasons. Then, just a few years later, that supposed defense fund starts paying for Athens' fancy new temples. And finally, Athens starts forcing its own laws and its own currency on its so-called allies. The alliance had become an empire in everything but name.
Let that sink in for a second. The Parthenon was basically paid for with money that was supposed to protect all Greeks from another invasion. Now, Pericles' justification was that as long as Athens kept the Persians away, it was Athens' business how the extra cash was spent. But a lot of people saw it differently. In fact, some modern historians have called it one of the largest embezzlements in history. Pericles was basically using the alliance's credit card to renovate his own city. And as you can probably imagine, that kind of power move did not go unnoticed. Athens' growing arrogance and its imperial muscle flexing put it on a direct collision course with the other great power in Greece, Sparta.
See, Sparta was this traditional land-based military society. Athens was a naval, democratic, and rapidly expanding empire. The historian Thucydides believed the real cause of the war was simply Sparta's growing fear of Athens' unchecked power. It was a classic power struggle just waiting to explode.
And things escalated fast. Athens started messing directly with Sparta's allies.
First, they sided against Corinth in a naval dispute. Then, Pericles pushed through something called the Megarian Decree, which was a crippling trade embargo on another of Sparta's allies. Sparta felt like its back was against the wall. They had to respond.
So when Sparta finally issued an ultimatum demanding that Athens back down, Pericles stood up and argued that giving in on anything would just be seen as weakness. It would only invite more demands down the line. He convinced the Athenians that war was coming no matter what, and it was better to fight now from a position of strength. He chose war.
So here we are, right back at our original question. How in the world do we judge this man who took such an enormous gamble with his city's future?
If you look at the balance sheet of his career, it's just incredible. On one side of the ledger, you've got the visionary, who perfected democracy and made Athens the cultural capital of the world. But on the other side, you've got the demagogue, who used public funds to lock in his power, and the imperialist, who dragged his people into a catastrophic war. The truth is, he was both.
And in just a profound, tragic twist of historical irony, Pericles' own war strategy became his undoing. His plan was to bring the entire population from the countryside safely inside the city walls. But the overcrowding created the perfect breeding ground for a horrific plague. Just 2 years into the war he started, Pericles himself was dead, leaving Athens totally leaderless in its absolute greatest crisis.
His supposed last words are just haunting. He's on his deathbed, and he claims his greatest achievement was that no Athenian ever had to go into mourning because of him, meaning he never had his political rivals executed. And while that's a noble thought, it just rings so hollow when you think about the thousands upon thousands who would die in the brutal 27-year war he set in motion. He never lived to see the final defeat, the tearing down of Athens' walls, and the complete end of the Golden Age he worked so hard to build.
And so that leaves us with the central question of his whole gamble. The Parthenon is still standing today, a testament to his incredible vision. The idea of democracy, it still inspires us. But these triumphs were bought with the freedom of other Greeks, and they were paid for with the blood of an entire generation. So, was the glory of the Golden Age really worth the price? That's the question history's still wrestling with.